For our authentication project, we chose to authenticate Susan Fletcher's Shadow Spinner, a novel representing Middle Eastern culture. Every night, Shahrazad begins a new story, and every morning the Sultan lets her live. One day, Marjan visits the harem and shares the beginnings of the story with Shahrazad. When Shahrazad lives to see another day, she calls on Marjan to tell her the rest of the story, but Marjan cannot remember the ending. Marjan is sent on a dangerous journey from the harem into the city to find the storyteller who can tell her the story's ending. If she is unsuccessful, the Sultan will kill Shahrazad. Can Marjan find the storyteller and get the rest of the tale to Shahrazad before nightfall?
The geographical setting of the novel is medieval or ancient Persia. Ancient Persia was located in what is now known as Greater Iran. The empire spanned from Egypt and Anatolia in the west to the borders of ancient India in the east. Cyrus the Great was the first leader of the Persian Empire in the 6th century BC. The empire lasted for about 200 years and fell in 330 BC when Alexander the Great defeated Darius III.
Ancient Persia. Fearless, formidable, unrelenting. For ages, shrouded in mystery. An empire unparalleled in conquest and riches.
To create an empire of the size of the Persian Empire, the largest empire the world had known, obviously takes military skill.
From North Africa to Asia, it was a civilization driven by a dynasty of extraordinary rulers, ambitious and all-powerful.
Cyrus the Great is one of the few who deserves to be called the Great.
The Persian Empire created some of the most astonishing feats of engineering the world has ever seen. Magnificent palaces that rose up from barren desert. Roadways, bridges, and canals.
In the opening scene of the novel, Marjan walks through the gates to the Sultan's palace and crosses the outer courtyard to the harem. While the novel does not mention a specific time period or location within the Persian Empire, we can assume the story takes place within one of the empire's larger cities, because Marjan lives within walking distance of the Sultan's palace. Another major setting of the novel is the bazaar. Bazaars were the main source of commerce in ancient Persia. The bazaars were quite large, and each artisan group occupied a specific region of the bazaar. A few of the professions that occupied sections of the bazaar included blacksmiths, spice makers, shoemakers, leather makers, tanners, potters, cooks, and carpet makers. When Marjan travels to the bazaar to look for the storyteller that she hoped would tell her the rest of her forgotten tale, she mentions a few different sections of the shopping quarters. As she enters the bazaar, she approaches the food stalls, the fruit sellers, the spice sellers, and the grain sellers. As she continues her search, she finds herself in the carpet bazaar, where she could see carpets, a whole row of them, hanging on a line strung above the street. Lastly, she rounded a corner into the leather bazaar with its revolting stench of animal skins and the blistering reek of tanning baths. Thus, the bazaar setting in the novel accurately depicts the vast shopping districts found in ancient Persia and modern-day Iran.
چی بالند شارازی والا به آسمونای لعت اوری راست بکن والا به دشت جونای.
The last setting we are going to discuss are the elaborate Persian baths. As Marjan enters into the harem chamber of baths, she describes what she sees. Columns of sunlight streamed in through round holes in the high, vaulted dome. Light mingled with smoke from burning censers and puddled on the marble floor like liquid gold. Brilliant tapestries studded with pearls hung from the walls. At the center of a blue mosaic fountain, 4 golden lions spouted clouds of glittering spray. Though Marjan visits these baths often, the only Persian baths we were able to find in our research were the Khedici Persian baths, built by Sultan Sayyid Said, and the Hamani baths built by Sultan Bargash. However, these baths were built in Zanzibar, Africa in the 19th century. This is long after the time period in which the book takes place. Thus, we were unable to provide authenticity as to whether or not the people living in ancient Persia would have visited these elaborate baths that the author describes.
Although none of the characters in Shadow Spinner ever explicitly state the religion they follow, there are many incidences where Marjan's actions and the views of her elders point to a certain religion. That religion is Islam. Firstly, we know that the setting of Shadow Spinner occurs in modern-day Iran, in which Islam religion is practiced in about 99% of the population. Iranian history also indicates that Islam has been the reigning religion in Iran since 637 AD. Therefore, Fletcher authenticates herself by writing Marjan's story from the Islamic perspective. As a part of the Islamic faith, there are 5 pillars Muslims are supposed to adhere to: faith, prayer, charity, fasting, and a pilgrimage to Mecca. Prayer, salat, is the second pillar of Islamic faith. Muslims are expected to pray 5 times a day. This does not mean that they need to attend a mosque to pray. Rather, the salat, or the daily prayer, should be recited 5 times a day. Muslims can pray anywhere. However, they are meant to pray towards Mecca. The faithful pray by bowing several times while standing and then kneeling and touching the ground or prayer mat with their foreheads, serving as a symbol of their reverence and submission to Allah. Marjan followed the salat practice on numerous occasions in the book. Even as Marjan was in some of the most crucial situations, such as battling her way through the bazaar, trying to save Shahrazad's life, and being held prisoner in a dungeon, Marjan still stopped to pray when she heard the muezzin call for prayers at noon and then again at sunset. An additional element of salat is the precondition that the worshipper be ritually pure. Ablution is that purification process. The word for ablution derives from the word for light in Arabic, signifying the resultant spiritual light that accrues to the one who performs it. As a part of ablutions, the worshipper is to wash their hands first and then their bodies with pure water, free from all contamination. Ablution is the weapon of the believer used to battle against enemies of the soul, and is therefore taken very seriously. If water is unavailable, extremely scarce, or contaminated, the worshipper is allowed to perform a substitute ablution with dry earth. On 2 occasions where Marjan prays, she does not have water to perform the proper ablutions. While Marjan was in the bazaar, a muezzin called for noon prayers. After everyone left the bazaar to pray, Marjan found a cool, dark place in the underground part of the carver's bazaar, behind a heap of sawdust. There was no place private to make ablutions with water, so she made ablutions touching earth and said her prayers. Later on, when Marjan was imprisoned in a dungeon, the muezzin called for prayers at noon and then again at sunset. Each time, Marjan prayed fervently. Since she couldn't get to water, she had to make dry ablutions, touching the dust on the floor of her own room. Marjan's prayers and rituals both align perfectly with Islamic prayers and rituals. A part of Marjan's culture is for women to remain covered. This cultural behavior became evident when Marjan and Dunyazad dressed as boys in order to get back into the harem. Marjan thought as she walked through the streets that even worse than the fear of being discovered was that she was walking around on the streets with no veil, with outside air touching her neck and ears. She felt naked. The veils Marjan, Dunyazad, and the women in Shadow Spinner wore are now known as hijabs. The hijab is the traditional covering of the hair and neck that is worn by Muslim women. The importance of the veil to Marjan aligns with the importance of the hijab to Muslim women, further authenticating the Islamic faith.
Women are now officially banned from wearing a full-face belt.
That certainly we would limit all sorts of things that people do for their religious beliefs because we don't agree with it.
My name is Zahra Al-Alawi. I've been wearing the hijab for the past 20 years or so. Many people may believe that women who wear the hijab wear it because they are forced or that they have no say in the matter. We as Muslims follow the Quran. So, does the Quran actually command women to wear the hijab? I wanted to know exactly what the Quran has said in regards to modesty and the physical veil. Chapter 24, verse number 31. You see the Quran talking about and commanding women to wear the physical veil. You see the word khumur mentioned. Khumur is plural for khimar. The word khimar by definition means a piece of cloth that covers the head. So it's clear that the Quran does command women in wearing the head coverings and extending it to cover their heads and chests.
One of the most important cultural identifiers Fletcher incorporates is the comb. Combs are among the most ancient Persian accessories, and archaeologists have found exquisite combs digging up the ancient Persian Empire going about 5,000 years and at the time of the first Indo-European migrations. Shahrazad summons Marjan to stay with her in the harem. Marjan's auntie gives her a small decorative comb that always reminds Marjan of the family she had. Marjan remembers that as she was about to be taken to the harem, Auntie Shava moved toward her, passed something into her hand. It was a comb, a jewel-studded comb, the kind you wear in your hair. Her comb, the one thing she had saved for herself. The comb was a recurring motif as Marjan remained in the harem. As mentioned previously, the author of Shadow Spinner is Susan Fletcher. Fletcher was born in Pasadena, California on May 28, 1951. Because Shadow Spinner is set in medieval Persia and the characters are Middle Eastern, while Susan Fletcher has only ever lived in the United States and is American, we assumed she was not qualified to write this novel. Surface-level research suggested she wrote the novel simply because she admired Shahrazad's ability to save so many people, not by fighting and killing, but by telling stories. Although that is not a bad reason to write a novel, it brought doubts to our minds over whether Fletcher was truly qualified to write an authentic novel about Middle Eastern culture. After digging deeper into research, we discovered Fletcher has visited the Middle East multiple times and conducted extensive research into the writing styles and traditions of ancient Persians. She then incorporates their writing styles by framing her story in a way that makes it as authentically Middle Eastern as it can be when written by someone outside of the culture. For example, every chapter in the novel has two parts. The first is a short epigraph called Lessons for Life and Storytelling, and the second is the body of the chapter. This represents the authentic practice in Middle Eastern oral storytelling of including moral lessons before beginning a story. Fletcher also includes references to the authentic practice of storytellers adding their own perspectives and twists to the tales. Not only does she create her own version of Richard Burton's The 1001 Nights, the original story about Shahrazad, she also emphasizes Shahrazad's desire to stay true to the true versions of the old tales, claiming the Sultan will know the right one when he hears it. Although Shahrazad prefers to tell the old tales as close to the originals as possible, Marjan, on the other hand, chooses to add her own perceptions to each story she tells. Another authentic practice of classic Persian authors represented in the novel is the tendency to relate the power of language to the power of the soul. For Iranians, spirituality means searching for the deepest essence of life. This is represented in the novel when Marjan is in trouble and the old storyteller advises her that, "We all have our demons to deal with, little pigeon. It's when we cherish them, cradle them to our breasts and feed them day after day. That's when they curdle our souls." Initially, Marjan only intends to provide Shahrazad with more stories to prevent her being killed by Shahriyar. However, all of her adventures lead her to go beyond saving people's bodies and to save their troubled souls. In doing so, she succeeds in saving her own wounded soul and then risks her life to save the Sultan's. Because Fletcher attempts to incorporate as many authentic examples of Middle Eastern culture as possible, her novel is received well by Iranians today. However, there are critics that worry breaching the boundaries of another culture lead to further oppression of the people in that culture if not handled delicately. Based on our research, Susan Fletcher may not be qualified to write the novel in terms of her own culture and birthplace, but she has done an excellent job of including authentic examples of Middle Eastern culture in her novel. However, we recommend using caution when labeling this book as a Middle Eastern historical fiction novel, as it is written by an author who is an outsider to the culture.